On January 11, 2020, local Taiwanese police made a gruesome discovery along a remote road in the mountainous Keelung area. Multiple body parts, carefully wrapped in blankets and concealed in bags, were found scattered along the path. The victim's limbs had been brutally severed, leaving behind a crime scene so horrific that even seasoned investigators were shaken by its savagery. Through forensic examination and identity verification of the recovered remains, police confirmed the victim was Dung Yonggan, a young woman from Perak, Malaysia. Yonggan was born into a large family as the fourth of 5 children, with 2 older sisters, 1 older brother, and 1 younger brother. She graduated from Peiyuan Independent High School before deciding to leave her homeland to study in Taiwan in 2014. During her university years in Taiwan, Yonggan was described by friends as gentle, sociable, and energetic. She actively participated in campus social activities and had a particular passion for badminton, frequently joining practice sessions and sports gatherings. After graduation, she briefly returned to Malaysia, but her deep affection for Taiwan's environment, lifestyle, and people drew her back. She obtained a work visa with hopes of building a long-term life there. Upon returning to Taiwan, Yonggan shared 2 small apartments with her cousin in a building on Fumen Road in Taipei's Wanhua district. Her life was simple, but stable. To support herself and gain experience, she found work as a server at a ramen shop near Taipei Main Station. January 5, 2020, marked the last night before Yonggan vanished. Around 8:30 p.m., she finished her shift and returned home as usual, with no sign of anything unusual. The following morning, before leaving for work, her cousin saw Yonggan sleeping peacefully in her room. However, when he returned home around 8 p.m. that evening, Yonggan was nowhere to be found. At first, he assumed she might be working overtime or had stopped somewhere, but as time passed, her room remained empty. Repeated calls to her phone went unanswered. Growing increasingly worried, her cousin contacted her co-workers, only to receive news that made his heart sink. Yonggan hadn't shown up for work that day. No one could reach her. It was as if she had simply vanished from her daily life. Her cousin knew Yonggan's character well. She was responsible, organized, and had never given anyone reason to worry. Her sudden disappearance was completely out of character. A sense of dread grew within him as he feared something terrible had happened to her. As night fell with still no word from Yonggan, her cousin and several of her co-workers rushed to the Wanhua District Police Station in Taipei to file a missing persons report. Officers were immediately dispatched to the apartment building where Yonggan rented her room to conduct a preliminary investigation, setting in motion a chain of events that would ultimately uncover a horrifying truth. Police proceeded to interview residents of the building, including a man named Lin Guoping, who lived in the room directly across from Yonggan's. When questioned, Guoping appeared remarkably calm, his demeanor so composed that it betrayed no signs of panic whatsoever. He claimed he had only encountered Yonggan a few times in the building, insisting they were not acquainted and had virtually no interaction. However, while standing at Guoping's door, the officers detected a pungent chemical odor, sharp and acrid, wafting through the air. The smell immediately raised their suspicions, as it was completely inconsistent with normal residential living. Yet despite their unease, Guoping maintained his composure, speaking coherently and showing no signs of distress or fear. Though their professional instincts told them something was wrong, the officers found themselves in a difficult position. Without concrete evidence or clear legal grounds, they could not forcibly enter and search Guoping's room. Reluctantly, they had no choice but to leave. The following day, January 8th, police returned to the building to question Lin Guoping a second time. Under more pressing questions, he revealed a detail he hadn't mentioned before. Guoping claimed that sometime earlier, the plumbing in Yonggan's bathroom had become clogged, preventing her from using it. According to him, he had kindly offered to let her use his bathroom, but she declined. He insisted this was the only interaction they ever had, and beyond that, they shared no connection whatsoever. He firmly denied any involvement in her disappearance. After leaving Guoping's room, police expanded their investigation by reviewing surveillance footage from the building's security cameras. What they found was deeply troubling. The footage showed that after Yonggan returned home on the evening of January 5th, she never appeared on camera again. From that moment on, there was no record of her leaving the building. This discovery led police to suspect that Yongun had likely met with foul play right inside the apartment complex, possibly ambushed or abducted somewhere between the entrance and her room. The scope of suspicion widened, and all residents of the building became persons of interest. As investigators expanded their search, they reviewed surveillance footage from cameras around the rental property. The images revealed a highly suspicious detail directly involving Lin Guoping. Shortly after 5 p.m. on January 7th, not long after police had first questioned him, cameras captured Guoping carrying 2 large cardboard boxes and 3 oversized plastic bags out of his room. He was seen repeatedly going back and forth through the building, hurriedly moving items as if relocating something urgently. What made the footage even more chilling was Guoping's demeanor throughout the process. He appeared disturbingly calm, even pausing casually by the roadside to light a cigarette, showing no signs of anxiety or haste. After loading everything, Guoping drove away in a small rental car and disappeared from the camera's view. Based on this decisive evidence, police concluded that Lin Guoping was a prime suspect. The case was immediately escalated from a routine missing persons investigation to a homicide case. Officers quickly applied for a search warrant to inspect Guoping's rental unit. When authorities returned to execute the warrant, they discovered Guoping was gone, his whereabouts unknown. With no other option, police forced open the door. The moment officers stepped inside, they were overwhelmed by an overpowering stench of insecticide that filled the entire space, so strong it made breathing difficult. A sense of dread immediately set in. Forensic technicians quickly began examining the scene, focusing particularly on the drain in the bathroom. Test results revealed clear traces of blood, despite obvious attempts to conceal them. Based on these initial findings, investigators suspected the bathroom was the primary crime scene, where the victim had been murdered and dismembered. By January 11th, police continued tracking Guoping's movements through roadside surveillance cameras. Footage showed he had driven the rental car toward Keelung. Investigators immediately followed his route into the mountainous region. At a convenience store at the foot of the mountain, they stopped to question staff and confirmed that Guoping had indeed been there to purchase items, strengthening their investigative lead. Since there was only one road leading up the mountain, police conducted a thorough search of the surrounding area, particularly spots where a vehicle could pull over and park. Finally, at a roadside parking area, they discovered 3 large plastic bags and 2 cardboard boxes that had been abandoned. When opened, the contents revealed a horrifying sight. The victim's body had been dismembered, divided into pieces, and packaged inside. The lower portion of the body was incomplete. The scene was utterly gruesome. Residents living near where the body was found were shocked and stunned. Many said the location was a familiar parking spot, since the surrounding area had very few places to park. On nice days, locals would often come to exercise, walk, or relax there, and police regularly patrolled the area. They simply couldn't believe the killer had been brazen enough to dump a body in such a public, well-known location. Here is a summary of the key events in chronological order. January 5th, 8:30 p.m. Yongun finished work and returned home as usual. January 6th, approximately 9 a.m. Before leaving for work, her cousin still saw Yongun sleeping in her room. January 6th, approximately 8 p.m. Her cousin returned from work, but couldn't find Yongun anywhere. After multiple failed attempts to reach her by phone and confirming with coworkers that she hadn't come to work, he went to the police station to file a missing persons report. January 7th. Police arrived at the rental property to investigate and noticed a strong, suspicious chemical odor emanating from Guoping's room. January 7th, after 5 p.m., surveillance cameras recorded Guoping carrying multiple plastic bags and cardboard boxes as he left the building, driving a rental car toward the mountainous Keelung area to dispose of the body. January 8th, early morning. Cameras captured Guoping at a convenience store near the mountain area making purchases. January 8th. Guoping returned the rental car and discarded his phone to cut off all traces of communication. January 8th. Police returned to question Guoping again, only to discover he had fled out of fear of being caught. January 11th, midday. Following Guoping's route from surveillance footage, police arrived at the Keelung mountain area and discovered Yongin's dismembered remains, bringing the haunting search to its grim conclusion. Through their investigation, police discovered that after returning the rental car on January 8th, Guoping had called his family and confessed to committing murder. According to his relatives, his voice during the call was extremely unstable, filled with despair, as if he was contemplating suicide. After the brief call, Guoping abruptly hung up and discarded his phone by the roadside in the Zhonghe area of New Taipei City, cutting off all means of contact. Additionally, police found that Yongin's personal bank account had been drained of over 10,000 TWD, approximately 300 USD, and the transactions were confirmed to have been made by Guoping after the crime. This was considered theft of the victim's assets, demonstrating the cold and calculated nature of the killer, even after he had taken her life. Continuing their investigation at Guoping's residence, police noticed that miscellaneous items on the building's rooftop had been trampled and knocked over, leaving unusual traces. The iron railing connecting to the adjacent apartment building also showed signs of having been opened, indicating the killer had used this route to move around and avoid detection. From these clues, investigators were able to reconstruct the entire sequence of events. According to the investigative findings, on the evening of January 6th, when Yongin returned to her rental unit, she was intercepted and abducted by Guoping. He brought her to his room and killed her there. Not stopping at murder, Guoping then dismembered the victim's body right in his bedroom before temporarily storing the remains in his bathroom. The following day, when police came to question residents, Guoping panicked, fearing his crime was about to be exposed. That evening, he placed the body parts into cardboard boxes and plastic bags, then painstakingly carried them from the 4th floor up to the rooftop. He crossed over to the adjacent apartment building and made his way down to the 1st floor to avoid being captured by surveillance cameras. After making multiple trips in and out of the building to load everything into his car, he finally drove to the Keelung mountain area and dumped the remains, attempting to erase all evidence of his terrible crime. At the time of the crime, Guoping was 45 years old with an extensive criminal record. His problems with the law had begun many years earlier. In 2005, Guoping worked as a security guard at a building in Keelung, but was fired due to poor attitude and job performance. Losing his job left him unemployed, without stable income, and he gradually spiraled deeper into a life of crime. After being terminated and failing to find new employment, Guoping returned to the very building where he had once worked, broke in illegally, and committed a brazen robbery. He attacked a woman who was taking her child to school, forced her to reveal her ATM PIN, then stole her car and drove to a bank to withdraw cash. The crime was quickly discovered, and Guoping was arrested and prosecuted shortly afterward. His criminal behavior didn't stop there. In the following years, Guoping continued to rack up convictions for drug offenses, theft, and robbery. In 2012, he was sentenced to prison once again for robbery. He wasn't released until approximately 2 years before the murder took place. After his release, Guoping had no stable employment and made a living doing manual labor at a market near his rental unit. On the night of January 12th, the Keelung police station received an urgent report from a resident claiming that a stranger had broken into their home and was burning charcoal to commit suicide. Officers immediately rushed to the scene. There, they found a man lying motionless in a makeshift rooftop room on the 4th floor of an apartment building. He showed no signs of life, and based on the condition of the body, death appeared to have occurred sometime earlier. Initial observations suggested the deceased man's build closely matched that of Guoping, the wanted suspect in the dismemberment murder case. However, because the victim's face had been severely blackened by smoke, visual identification was impossible. Police subsequently conducted fingerprint analysis, which confirmed the dead man was indeed Lin Guoping, who had been on the run for several days after committing the crime. The homeowner stated they had no acquaintance with Guoping whatsoever. At the time of the incident, the entire family had been away in their hometown to vote in an election. Only upon returning home did they discover that someone had broken in. The windows inside were sealed shut, and the front door was locked from the inside. When they forced the door open, they found someone had committed suicide by charcoal burning inside. The homeowner couldn't hide their shock and horror upon learning that a complete stranger had died in their home. They insisted they had no connection to Guoping and considered the entire situation an unimaginable misfortune. At the scene of his suicide, Guoping left behind no suicide note or message explaining the chain of criminal acts he had committed. As a result, with the killer's death, the true motive behind Yongen's murder was buried with him forever, becoming a mystery that will never have a clear answer. The truth behind this tragedy, what ultimately drove Guoping to commit such an act, will remain an open question for all time. Based on the evidence gathered and indirect testimony, police could only speculate that Guoping may have developed feelings for Yongen but was rejected by her. This rejection possibly bred resentment, ultimately leading to the brutal murder. However, since the perpetrator was deceased, the case was legally closed, and Guoping would never face prosecution under the law. After the tragedy occurred, Yongen's mother, along with her two older sisters and an aunt, immediately traveled to Taipei to learn the details of what had happened and make funeral arrangements. After the Taiwan prosecutor's office completed the autopsy, the family received Yongen's remains amid unspeakable grief. On January 17th, Yongen's funeral was held at Taipei First Funeral Parlor. In an atmosphere of sorrow and silence, family, friends, and acquaintances bid farewell to the young woman, laying her to rest and closing a life filled with unfinished dreams. On January 18th, Yongen's mother carried her cremated ashes from Taipei back to Malaysia. When her father and several relatives saw the vehicle carrying Yongen's ashes arrive at their doorstep, tears flowed uncontrollably. The ashes were carried in a backpack on her older sister's back. As she stepped out of the car, her parents broke down completely, crying out in anguish. Her father managed only to say, "Daddy wants to hold you," before his emotions completely overwhelmed him. Her mother sobbed, calling out, "You're home now," creating a scene that broke the hearts of all who witnessed it. In the memories of her relatives, Yongen was a gentle, quiet, shy, and filial young woman. Though she had spent years studying and living in Taiwan, she never missed Chinese New Year, returning home every year to reunite with her family. Yongen had planned for this year's New Year to be her final return, after which she would stay in Malaysia to work, beginning a new chapter of life alongside her beloved family. But fate proved far too cruel. A young woman so kind, gentle, and full of promise had her life cut short in the most tragic of circumstances. Her story left not only her family in profound grief, but also touched everyone who learned of it, leaving them heartbroken and haunted by the cruelty of fate. In today's world where the internet connects us all, meeting and befriending strangers online has become commonplace. But no one could have imagined that after leaving home just once to meet an online friend, this young girl would lose contact with her family forever. Her mother frantically searched everywhere, desperately following every small lead, but all efforts led nowhere. It was as if the girl had vanished from the face of the earth overnight, leaving behind not a single trace. From the moment she went missing, public opinion initially assumed this was simply another case of a teenage girl running away with someone she met online, a story all too common in modern society. But behind her disappearance lay not a youthful, impulsive decision, but a truth far more cruel and terrifying than anyone could have imagined. The missing girl was Ng Yuk Tim, 15 years old, living in the Kepong area of Kuala Lumpur. She grew up in a single-parent household. After her parents divorced, Yuk Tim lived with her mother, her maternal grandparents, and a younger sister to whom she was extremely close. In the eyes of her family and teachers, Yuk Tim was always an obedient, understanding, and studious girl. From elementary school onward, she achieved outstanding academic results and was loved by everyone for her gentle, kind-hearted nature. Beyond her studies, Yuk Tim had a special passion for anime. She loved the colorful world of animation and often spent her time learning about it and chatting with others who shared her interest. With her cheerful, optimistic, and innocent personality, Yuk Tim was still just a teenage girl in her most dreamy years, with no interest whatsoever in romantic relationships. On the morning of October 21, 2013, around 11 a.m., Yuk Tim told her mother, Sim Yi Ling, that she was going out to meet a friend and would then stop by the home of a male friend she had met online to discuss anime cosplay and work on props together. By 9 p.m., Her mother, who worked as a salesperson at a jewelry store, returned home from work to find that Yuk Tim still hadn't come back. When she tried calling her daughter's cell phone, it was turned off. Knowing her daughter was a responsible person who would never disappear without reason unless something had happened, the mother immediately felt uneasy. She posted a missing persons notice on Facebook, reported the disappearance at the local police station, and even went to nearby hospitals searching for any sign of her daughter, but found nothing. The next morning, to quickly determine Yuk Tim's whereabouts, police contacted the telecommunications company and obtained her phone's call records from before she went missing. From this data, they called the last number Yuk Tim had contacted. The person who answered was Poon Wai Hong, 23 years old. When questioned by police, Wai Hong stated that around 2 p.m. the previous day, he had dropped Yuk Tim off at a nearby light rail station waiting area, then left, claiming he had no knowledge of what happened afterward. Shortly after, Yi Ling, Yuk Tim's mother, accompanied police to the light rail station where her daughter was supposedly last seen to review the security camera footage. However, despite carefully examining every frame, they found no images of Yuk Tim whatsoever, making the case even more mysterious and alarming. Given the situation, police continued to follow up with Poon Wai Hong for further clarification. Around 3:30 p.m., Wai Hong appeared at the light rail station as requested, joining police and Yuk Tim's mother in searching for the missing girl. He even left a comment on Yuk Tim's Facebook page, expressing his hope that she would return home safely and appearing outwardly very concerned, like a friend who genuinely cared. However, after an extensive search conducted by police throughout the surrounding area, all efforts still yielded no leads. Following suggestions from reporters covering the case, Yi Ling decided to seek help from Kwan Chi Hung, chairman of the Malaysian People's Volunteer Corps. The moment he received the desperate call from the mother, Mr. Kwan immediately sensed that the man surnamed Poon showed many suspicious signs. With years of experience assisting in missing persons cases, he asked Yi Ling to find a way to keep Wai Hong around, preventing him from leaving the scene too soon. Around 5 p.m., Kwan Chi Hung and two friends quickly arrived to meet Yi Ling. While observing and conversing, he happened to notice very clear wounds on the back of Wai Hong's hand and forearm. Sensing something was wrong, he immediately pulled Wai Hong aside and asked him directly. At first, Wai Hong tried to brush it off, saying the wounds were from an accident at work. However, with his experienced eye, Mr. Kwan quickly recognized that these were not ordinary injuries. They were human bite marks, clearly imprinted on the skin. Under the barrage of questions and direct confrontation, Wai Hong's psychological defenses gradually crumbled. Finally, unable to hide any longer, he calmly lowered his head and admitted that he was the one who had killed Yuk Tim. Immediately afterward, police arrested Wai Hong and brought him to the station for questioning. Before investigators, Wai Hong appeared relatively calm and confessed that he and Yuk Tim had known each other through Facebook for about 2 years. They shared a passion for anime, frequently chatted online, and had even created a Facebook group for anime enthusiasts together, through which they met many other friends with similar interests. According to Wai Hong's statement, on October 21, 2013, Yuk Tim came to his house as usual to discuss anime cosplay and work on props together. Everything initially proceeded normally, exactly as they had planned. However, while they were making props together, Wai Hong suddenly developed lustful urges and attempted to force Yuk Tim into having sex. To protect herself and her innocence, Yuk Tim resisted fiercely, even biting Wai Hong's arm. This act of resistance sent him into a rage. Losing control, Wai Hong strangled Yuk Tim, then grabbed a nearby dumbbell and struck her head. When he realized Yuk Tim was no longer breathing, Wai Hong panicked but continued to conceal his crime. He stuffed her body into a suitcase, loaded it onto a truck, and drove to an industrial area about 20 miles from the scene, where he dumped the body. Police then escorted Wai Hong to the location where he had disposed of the body. Finally, in a dense patch of grass beside the Puchong industrial area, authorities discovered an abandoned green suitcase. When they opened it, the sight inside left everyone present stunned. Yuk Tim's body lay folded inside, cruelly crammed into the confined space. Her head and hands showed dried bloodstains, and the body had already begun to emit the smell of decomposition. Based on the condition of the corpse, police initially estimated that Yuk Tim had been dead for more than 12 hours. To further strengthen the evidence, police extracted security camera footage from factories around the industrial area. The recordings showed that on the night of the crime, Wai Hong drove a silver truck to the area, stopped briefly, threw the green suitcase into the roadside brush, then quickly drove away. The entire process of disposing of the body was clearly captured on camera, becoming irrefutable evidence. Subsequently, police searched Wai Hong's home and found a dumbbell in his room, identified as the murder weapon. According to the forensic autopsy report, Yuk Tim showed no signs of sexual assault. There were strangulation marks on her neck, but these were not the cause of death. The actual cause of death was determined to be severe trauma to the head, consistent with the perpetrator's confession about attacking the victim with the dumbbell. When she learned of her daughter's death, Mother Yi Ling nearly collapsed completely. She could not and did not want to believe that her obedient, gentle daughter, whom she loved with all her heart, had suffered such a cruel death. The pain came so suddenly that she could barely find the strength to stand. As Wai Hong was being escorted to the police station, he appeared cold and showed no resistance before the media cameras. He even turned to Yi Ling and uttered a detached, "Sorry." But for a mother who had just lost her child, that apology was utterly meaningless. Yi Ling said she would never be able to accept an apology from the person who had taken her daughter's precious life. A single sorry could not bring back Yuk Tim. The only thing she wanted now was for Wai Hong to receive the full punishment of the law, to restore justice for her daughter and her family. Yet the tragedy did not end there. Beyond the irreplaceable pain of losing her child, Yi Ling also had to endure a wave of harsh criticism from internet users. Many blamed her, saying she hadn't supervised her daughter carefully enough, had allowed her to make friends online, and had even permitted her to go alone to the home of a male internet friend, viewing this as irresponsible parenting. These cruel criticisms cut like additional knife wounds into the already immense pain of a mother who had just lost her child. But in reality, those critics had no idea that Yuk Tim was an extremely obedient and understanding girl. She had never given her family reason to worry, lived very independently, and was always careful. Before doing anything, Yuk Tim would proactively ask her mother's opinion, which is why Yi Ling felt at ease and didn't interfere too much in her daughter's personal life. Moreover, Yuk Tim had known Wai Hong for 2 years and had developed a certain level of trust in him, so no one could have predicted that this man would lose his senses and treat her with such irredeemable cruelty. As for why Wai Hong became such a violent person, part of the answer likely lies in his own traumatic upbringing. Wai Hong grew up in a broken family. When he was just 7 years old, his parents divorced, and his mother left to live in Ipoh. From then on, he lived with his father and frequently suffered physical beatings in his own home. After his father passed away, Wai Hong moved in with his older sister and his grandmother, who was over 80 years old, in Kapong New Village. In terms of personality, Wai Hong was quiet and introverted, appearing outwardly gentle and simple. His daily life was rather monotonous. He rarely left the house, spending most of his time in front of the computer, lacking social interaction and having very few friends in real life. However, he had a special passion for anime, frequently participated in cosplay competitions, and even won numerous awards. The contrast between his gentle exterior, his healthy hobby, and his subsequent criminal behavior made the case all the more haunting and difficult to accept. The case that had once shocked the nation was postponed 3 times before finally going to trial on August 29, 2016. The prolonged period not only tested public patience, but also compounded the grief of the victim's family. At the trial, the prosecutor presented video footage from security cameras showing the entire process of Wai Hong carrying the suitcase containing Yuk Tim's body to dispose of it. Based on the evidence collected, the prosecution argued that Wai Hong had not acted impulsively, but had premeditated intent. A close friend of Wai Hong was also called as a witness, testifying that before the crime occurred, Wai Hong had repeatedly changed the meeting location with Yuk Tim, as if deliberately creating situations where he could be alone with the girl. According to the prosecution's assessment, Wai Hong had secretly harbored feelings for Yuk Tim for a long time. Every time they met, he would stare at her almost exclusively, displaying an obsession that crossed normal boundaries. It was this obsession, combined with a distorted psychology, that led to the irreversible tragedy. More notably, the prosecutor emphasized that after committing the crime, Wai Hong displayed a chillingly cold composure. He was able to quickly plan how to conceal his crime, stuffing the body into a suitcase, loading it onto the truck, driving to a remote location to dump it, then returning home as if nothing had happened, even going online to play video games. When his sister noticed her green suitcase was missing, Wai Hong made up a story about lending it to a friend. The next day, when police came to investigate, he remained calm enough to fabricate stories, fooling both Yuk Tim's mother and the investigators. This chain of cold, calculated behavior and continuous lying made it difficult for even those attending the trial to imagine that a person who appeared so quiet and gentle on the outside could hide such a dangerous interior. On April 3, 2018, after more than a year of extended proceedings, the case finally reached a crucial verdict. Based on Wai Hong's confession presented by the prosecution as key evidence, the judicial panel reached a unanimous decision after deliberation. Wai Hong was guilty of murder and sentenced to death. This was considered the harshest possible sentence, providing some measure of relief for the resentment and pain that Yuk Tim's family had endured for years. Upon hearing the sentence, Wai Hong maintained his familiar composure, showing virtually no emotion. However, his defense attorney immediately filed an appeal, opening a new chapter in the case. For Yi Ling, Yuk Tim's mother, although she felt somewhat comforted that justice had finally sided with her daughter, that sense of relief was quickly replaced by worry. The fact that the defense still had the right to appeal made her fear that the death sentence could be changed. Even though the court had delivered a verdict to restore justice for Yuk Tim and her family, for a mother, no verdict could bring her daughter back. Just when everyone thought the case was closed, reality proved far more complicated. Wai Hong's representative attorney continued the appeal and requested that the charge be changed from murder to manslaughter. As a result, Wai Hong was required to appear in court once again to defend himself. In his self-defense, Wai Hong completely overturned his previous testimony. He claimed that he had only pushed Yuk Tim, causing her to lose her balance, fall, and hit her head on the dumbbell. He firmly insisted that this was merely an unintentional accident, not deliberate murder. The defense attorney also argued that the confession previously presented by the prosecution had no direct witnesses, and all testimony was only indirect, based on inference. Additionally, he pointed out that Yuk Tim's body had a total of 10 wounds, and apart from the fatal wound on the left side of her head, the remaining injuries, including the wound on her left hand, could be consistent with the theory that the victim had fallen. The defense further emphasized that Wai Hong had no motive and no intent to kill, and that his handling of the body afterward stemmed only from momentary panic and fear, which could not be considered evidence of premeditated intent to kill. Since the court could not use the confession as direct evidence, the case was left with only circumstantial evidence. The 22-pound dumbbell was confirmed as the weapon that caused the fatal wound. When providing testimony in court, the forensic examiner also did not completely rule out the possibility that the 2 serious head wounds on Yuk Tim could have resulted from a fall. After considering all the defense's arguments, the court reached a decision that shocked many. Wai Hong's charge was changed from murder to manslaughter, overturning the previous death sentence and replacing it with 22 years in prison plus caning, with time served calculated from his arrest in 2013. When the verdict was announced, Yi Ling broke down crying on the spot. She had only hoped that the criminal would receive the punishment he deserved, but now everything had been turned upside down, the facts distorted, and her departed daughter's memory tarnished. At that point, the prosecution had only one final chance to appeal, and she still hoped that justice would ultimately be served for her daughter. On September 1st, 2020, the prosecutor suddenly withdrew the appeal decision. This was because a recent murder case had resulted in a manslaughter conviction with only 15 years in prison, which threatened to set a precedent. If Yiling insisted on continuing the appeal, not only would there be no chance of overturning the decision, but there was actually a high probability that Weihong's sentence could be reduced even further. After hearing the prosecutor's explanation, Yiling felt utterly hopeless. She expressed her feelings on Facebook. The days of going to court are finally officially over. This is the law. Everyone is equal, except the dead apparently don't count as people. Someone once asked her if, after all these years, she should have moved on by now. But for Yiling, love and longing will never end, and neither will the pain. This pain makes it hard for her to breathe. Heaven is truly too unfair. Even though Weihong was sentenced to 22 years in prison, after deducting time off for good behavior and the years he had already been detained, he would likely be free in less than 9 years. This cruel killer would be able to walk the streets freely, while she had lost her precious daughter forever. And those are 2 heartbreaking cases for today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.